WRTV shares stories of Black History Month. This evening, an Indianapolis woman is shining a light on a dark part of her family history. Her distant relative helped create the very device that would end his life.
It was a pitch black space, and you would see a light.
When LaTonya Collier was a sophomore at Martin University, she says a recurring image appeared in her dreams.
I didn't know who it was. It was a picture of a man.
She had no idea why he kept appearing to her as she slept. During her time at Martin University, LaTonya was studying criminal justice and had aspirations to become a lawyer.
So my sophomore year, I was writing papers left and right. Then I ran out of ideas.
She needed an idea for a thesis project and kept coming up blank. A visit to her great-aunt Mildred did the trick.
She said, "Why don't you write about your great-great-grandpa? He was the first black man in the state of Indiana to be executed by the electric chair, and he actually helped build that chair." I was like, "What?" I said, "How do you build a chair and then get executed in it?" She said, "Do the research."
Challenge accepted.
And I went to the state library, and I went through the photos. It was his picture. I was about to pass out.
It was the image of the man who appeared to LaTonya in her sleep, Robert Collier, her great-great-grandfather. Robert Collier is described as strong-willed and hot-tempered, with a long rap sheet and only an 8th grade education. LaTonya poured through old newspapers and interviewed her elder relatives to piece together his story.
His crime was for the murder of Patrolman John Kane in Evansville, Indiana.
While there are differing versions of events, what LaTonya learned is that the night of Officer Kane's death, an argument broke out during a late-night gathering in an Evansville neighborhood. Police had told everyone to leave.
My great-great-grandfather said, "I'm not moving. I got a right to be here." And Kane told him, "You're going to move or I'm going to move you." And his exact words were, "Do it and die." Kane hit him with a billy club and knocked him down. Great-great-grandpa got back up, shot him, and took off running.
Collier pleaded guilty in June of 1914 and was sentenced to death. He was moved to a state prison in Michigan City. Collier told people the last time he stayed at that same prison, he had a job to do.
The hanging gallows was the stay of execution. So when they changed it, they had a group of inmates tear it down and help rebuild.
Collier says he was part of a crew that built Indiana's electric chair, using the wood from the old hanging gallows. And the story goes, at the time, he joked he would be the first one to sit in the chair.
And he did, not knowing that that was going to be the last place you sit.
Robert Collier was 34 when he died October 16th, 1914.
Right before the execution, when the reporter asked him, you have any words you want to say? He said, "Yeah, I don't want anybody to follow my footsteps. They need to get an education."
A scholar herself, delving into this chapter of her family's history became a passion project for LaTonya. She documented her first visit to see the chair on display at the Indiana Department of Correction Museum in Newcastle.
Any words, Mama?
LaTonya compiled this binder with notes, letters, newspaper articles, and pictures. Anything she could find about her great-great-grandfather, including his death certificate.
October 16, colored, electrocution.
In 2010, she wrote a book called Show No Fear, the 1914 execution of Robert Collier, which offered his perspective of events. What moved you later in life, right, to write a book?
His story, it's like he wanted it to be told. Nobody listened to him back then.
A man with a story that LaTonya feels he urged her to share by visiting her in her sleep.
Some people don't believe in that. I do. Just because your ancestors go don't mean they're not going to try to communicate, and that's his way of communicating.
Robert Collier may have only had an 8th grade education, but he may have been proud to know that his great-great-granddaughter's granddaughter is now the youngest in the family to graduate from high school at 16 years old. Meantime, LaTonya is returning to Evansville this spring to put a headstone on Collier's grave.